The Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess of the subcommittee at any time. Welcome to today's hearing entitled Returning to the Moon, Keeping Artemis on Track. And before I offer my opening statement, I would like to acknowledge that I appreciate our witnesses being here today. Mother Nature is proving to be somewhat challenging this week, as you can see by the turnout of membership. This has been a hearing that's been much anticipated by the members in a very enthusiastic way, but you have to physically get here. And that's a challenge we're working in. And Subcommittee Chairman Babin is in the air somewhere between here and Houston. So the moment he arrives, we'll have a proper chairman to preside over this process. With that, I want to recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Good morning, and I welcome everyone to the Science Committee's first hearing of 2024. It's fitting that we're kicking off the year with a hearing on Artemis, given its importance to our space program and to U.S. competitiveness. My top priority since becoming chairman of the Science Committee has been to ensure that American competitiveness and leadership in the fields of research and technology development. This includes U.S. activities in space, especially human exploration. The importance of U.S. leadership in space is why some of our top legislative priorities as Congress include a NASA reauthorization bill, which we'll consider this spring, and the Commercial Space Act. It has been almost 7 years since a comprehensive NASA authorization bill was signed into law, and that's simply too long for an agency of NASA's importance. Much has happened during that period, and this committee should provide direction to NASA's activities for the coming years, especially in the areas of human exploration. How we address future human exploration beyond low Earth orbit is undoubtedly a topic we'll address in the NASA authorization bill. Artemis is a cornerstone of that effort. I'm confident that I speak for everyone on this committee when I say we all support Artemis. This committee has long directed NASA to return humans to the moon and eventually Mars. But this committee's support of Artemis means asking detailed questions of NASA and providing oversight of the agency's proposals. Congress must have proper insight in the agency's planning and execution of this mission to ensure its success. This also means listening to inputs from external stakeholders and hearing differing viewpoints, which is why we've assembled a panel of witnesses with a variety of perspectives today. Last week, NASA announced the delay of Artemis II to September 2025 and Artemis III to September 2026. I look forward to hearing from NASA about the cause of these delays and potential impacts to future missions and about the steps it is taking to mitigate future risks. We have a responsibility to not only our constituents, but the international community to see that Artemis is executed in a timely and physically responsible manner without sacrificing safety. I remind my colleagues that we are not the only country interested in sending humans to the moon. The Chinese Communist Party is actively soliciting international partners for a lunar mission, a lunar research station, and has stated its ambition to have human astronauts on the surface by 2030. The country that lands first will have the ability to set a precedent for whether future lunar activities are conducted with openness and transparency or in a more restricted manner. I'm grateful to our panel for appearing before us today to share their experience and expertise, and I look forward to a productive discussion on how we can ensure the success of Artemis and the best way for the U.S. to be the world leader in human space exploration. I now recognize Ranking Member Sorensen for his opening statement.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Lucas, for holding today's hearing, Returning to the Moon, Keeping Artemis on Track. I want to welcome our distinguished witnesses. Thank you for your time and your expertise and for being here today. I was not alive, huddled around the TV for Apollo 11, but my parents watched that landing. I'm the son of an aerospace engineer and a meteorologist with a deep love of science. I know the profound impact it has had on our country and on our world. When I look up in the night sky, I wonder what's up there. I want us to know what's up there. Today we're examining NASA's Artemis mission. The program, separated into several stages, is designed to bring humans step by step to the moon and beyond. Artemis will inspire the next generation, strengthen our aerospace industry and international partnerships, and demonstrate capabilities needed to eventually send humans to Mars. Last year, I was proud to host NASA astronaut Dr. Kate Rubins in my district in Western Illinois. Dr. Rubins spoke about her excitement for the upcoming generation. She believes that, and I spoke with our witnesses earlier, that the first humans that will set foot on Mars may be in a first grade classroom today. What an exciting possibility for the next generation, for our children. The Artemis 1 mission was an important first uncrewed test that sent the Orion vehicle thousands of miles beyond the moon before its return to Earth. Artemis 2 will test additional systems as it brings humans around the moon. And Artemis 3 will land humans back on the lunar surface. The difficulty of these missions cannot be underestimated. Last week, we learned that NASA is delaying the Artemis 2 and 3 missions by about a year. I stand behind NASA in prioritizing safety for Artemis, and I look forward to gaining further insight into the delays and any related costs. Artemis requires a sustained national investment. In a 2021 report, the NASA Office of the Inspector General said, quote, NASA is projected to spend $93 billion on the Artemis effort from fiscal year 2012 to 2025, end quote. And that's even before we land our astronauts on the moon. As authorizers with oversight responsibility, this committee needs to ensure that those investments are made wisely. This hearing provides a timely opportunity to get both an update on the progress and an understanding of the pressing issues of the Artemis program, including, does NASA and Congress have an appropriate level of understanding of the cost of key Artemis systems, individual Artemis missions, and a sustained lunar exploration effort? What is the critical path for returning humans to the moon, and what is the plan for addressing all of the challenges? How would a fiscal 2024 budget at enacted 2023 levels, or even a cut below the 2023 levels, affect this program? How are NASA and its partners addressing risks, and how will risk be communicated to the American people? In closing, Mr. Chairman, I want Artemis to be safe and successful. Artemis and Moon to Mars are tremendous opportunities and of importance to the United States and the rest of the world. America's international leadership and engagement in the Artemis program and the Artemis Accords will promote peaceful, safe, and sustainable exploration of the moon and other celestial bodies. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee for a statement.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing. I want to welcome our witnesses and thank you for being here to discuss the topic of returning to the moon, keeping Artemis on track. This committee, as the chairman has noted, has long maintained its bipartisan support for Artemis and the NASA's Moon to Mars efforts, and I don't see that changing in any way. I was thrilled with the success of the Artemis 1 test flight. In my own state of California, NASA's Moon to Mars campaign supports 11,600 jobs and created an economic impact of $2.8 billion, according to NASA's 2021 Economic Impact Report. So let me be clear, I support Artemis, but I want it to be successful, especially with China at our heels, and we want to be helpful here in the committee in ensuring that Artemis is strong and staying on track as we look to lead the world hand in hand with our partners in the human exploration of the moon and beyond. Now, sending people into space, let alone the moon, isn't easy, and NASA recently announced delays to the Artemis 2 and 3 missions. I have confidence in NASA's workforce and the decision to keep safety as a top priority. To that end, I look forward to understanding the details behind the recent delays and what's involved in addressing those issues. As the Artemis efforts continue, we as the authorized committee must have our eyes wide open. Moon to Mars is a multi-decadal effort that will span several Congresses and administrations. Full situational awareness requires that, one, we know how much the key Artemis systems cost, as well as the missions themselves. Two, have a realistic understanding of how NASA is assessing schedule, and 3, have clarity on the topmost technical challenges and risks and how they're being addressed across NASA and among its diverse set of partners and acquisition mechanisms. We also know NASA has a lot on its plate. The future of low Earth orbit and the planned end of the International Space Station operations in 2030, the need for critical yet costly deorbit vehicle, the transition to the use of future commercial space stations and their readiness to come online, all this has to be kept in mind. In addition, key considerations on the Mars sample return are on the horizon, and as we learned last week from NASA and NOAA's annual assessment of global temperature, we must continue to obtain the measurements and observations needed to understand and mitigate the impacts of climate crisis. In short, NASA is a multi-mission agency, and we can't lose sight of the benefits and challenges of a balanced portfolio. But supporting balance won't be made any easier by the dysfunctional appropriations process that I think threatens to undermine what we know is best for leading the world and growing our economy in a sustainable way, investments in R&D and innovations such as those at NASA. I'm excited about Artemis and Moon to Mars, and I look forward to working with our chairman, with the administration, and with stakeholders on building a smart, strong, and sustainable path forward. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair would note that when Subcommittee Chairman Babin arrives, we'll make his time for an opening statement too. Let me introduce our witnesses. Our first witness today is Catherine Kerner, Associate Administrator for the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate of NASA. Her responsibilities include the development of the Moon to Mars infrastructure, management of systems development for Artemis, and planning NASA's deep space exploration approach. Ms. Kerner previously served as the Deputy Associate Administrator for the Directorate, and prior to that served as the Orion Program Manager. Our next witness is Mr. William Russell, Director of Contracting and National Security Acquisitions at GAO. He manages a portfolio which includes issues related to NASA and DoD's industrial base and supply chain integrity, among other topics. Mr. Russell joined GAO in 2002 and has previously served on GAO's Homeland Security and Justice team. Our third witness is Mr. George Scott, Acting Inspector General at NASA. He assumed the role in January of this year, having previously served as the Deputy Inspector General. Prior to joining NASA, Mr. Scott served over 3 decades at GAO, which included serving as the Managing Director of GAO's Homeland Security and Justice team. Our final witness is Dr. Michael Griffin, Co-President of LOGIQ, a scientific and technical consulting firm he co-founded. Dr. Griffin previously served as the 11th Administrator of NASA, leading the agency from 2005 to 2009. He has also served as the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, as well as the Space Department Head at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. Again, thank you all for being here today, and I now recognize Ms. Kerner for 5 minutes to present her testimony.
Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Sorensen, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on NASA's Artemis campaign. Under the Artemis campaign, the United States, along with our international and commercial partners, will return humans to the moon to explore, conduct scientific research, and establish the capability for a long-term human presence on and around the moon. Then, using what we learn at the moon, we will take the next giant leap, sending the first humans to Mars. In November 2022, NASA took the first major step in America's return to the moon with the Artemis I mission. That historic launch and 25-and-a-half-day mission tested the Space Launch System rocket, the Orion spacecraft, and the exploration ground systems in preparation for Artemis II. On Artemis II, NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen will journey beyond low Earth orbit and around the moon, the farthest humans have journeyed into space in more than 50 years. Approximately 1 year after Artemis II, the Artemis III crew will land on the lunar South Pole and begin building out a robust long-term exploration program. With Artemis IV, astronauts will again visit the lunar surface and start assembly of the space station in lunar orbit called Gateway. NASA's plan for a successful and sustainable return to the moon requires the development of several new space systems, including the SLS rocket, the Orion spacecraft, the Exploration Ground Systems, lunar landers, the Gateway Space Station, and new lunar spacesuits and lunar rovers. Last year, pursuant to the NASA Authorization Act of 2022, NASA established the Moon to Mars Program Office, which focuses on the development of these new systems, mission integration, and risk management across the portfolio. This new office also leads planning and analysis for long lead technology developments to support humans to Mars. In the years since NASA's successful Artemis 1 flight test, NASA has continued to refine the schedule of the follow-on Artemis missions. Based on data from Artemis 1 and the readiness of the space systems needed to safely transport our crews from Earth to the lunar surface and back, the Artemis 2 adds several new systems to support astronauts inside of Orion. In addition, we are continuing to study the Orion heat shield from Artemis 1 to ensure the safety of our crew on future missions. Based on these factors, we're planning for Artemis 2 to launch in September of 2025. Artemis 3 will build on the progress of Artemis 1 and 2 and adds a commercial lunar lander and advanced spacesuits for walking on the lunar surface. In 2026, Artemis 3 will send humans back to the surface of the moon. While sending humans back to the moon will be a significant accomplishment, we do not intend to stop there. NASA's long-term goal is to send humans to Mars, and the moon will help us get there. Mars is a rich destination for scientific discovery and a driver of technologies that will enable humans to travel and explore far from Earth. By using what we learn on and around the moon under Artemis, NASA is working to understand and overcome the future challenges associated with landing and living on Mars. As NASA builds a blueprint for human exploration throughout the solar system for the benefit of humanity, we conducted our first 2 architecture concept reviews, the culmination of a robust analysis process designed to align NASA's Moon to Mars exploration strategy and codify the supporting architecture. This annual review is a milestone that enables our Moon to Mars strategy to evolve over time as we consider lessons from previous missions and provide opportunities to on-ramp new technologies as well as new industry and international partners. Through the Artemis campaign, NASA is partnering with the most diverse and broad exploration coalition in history, including multiple international and commercial partners. For example, NASA's Gateway program is an international collaboration with the Canadian Space Agency, European Space Agency, Japan Exploration Agency, and now the United Arab Emirates Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center to establish humanity's first space station around the moon. Similarly, NASA is exploring additional international partnerships for lunar surface habitats, logistics, and mobility capabilities that will enable long-term human presence and enhance scientific returns. Together, we will continue to develop the technology and the systems needed to live and work on and around the moon in preparation for human missions to Mars. Because of our diverse astronaut corps, we will be able to fly the first woman, first person of color, and the first international astronaut to the moon. We will align with our international partners towards a future of expanded economic opportunity and scientific discovery while investing in the next generation of STEM leaders as we support the limitless possibilities of space exploration. NASA is grateful for this committee's continued support of the Artemis campaign, and I appreciate this opportunity to update you on behalf of NASA and our Artemis partners, and we'll be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Russell for 5 minutes to present his testimony.
Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren, Ranking Member Sorensen, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss NASA's efforts to return astronauts to the surface of the moon and ultimately human exploration of Mars through the Artemis missions. NASA has requested at least $38 billion over the next 5 years to support this ambitious undertaking. The projects supporting Artemis are complex and specialized and often push the state-of-the-art in space technology. These new projects include a human landing system to transport crew to the lunar surface and spacesuits for lunar operations. In addition, NASA plans to rely on existing programs, including the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle and the Space Launch System. Successfully executing the Artemis missions will require extensive coordination across programs and with a wide range of contractors to ensure systems operate together seamlessly and safely. Our work has highlighted NASA's progress towards its Artemis flight tests and lunar landing mission, Examples include the successful launch of Artemis 1 in November 2022, which demonstrated the initial capability of the Space Launch System, as well as the Exploration Ground Systems. For Artemis 2, the first flight with crew, NASA is currently conducting integration and testing of the crew capsule and the launch pad. And for Artemis 3, the first crewed lunar landing mission, the HLS contractor has conducted 2 test flights. NASA also continues to make progress on its integration and risk management plans, such as establishing mechanisms for identifying and tracking Artemis 3 risks and the establishment and implementation of the Moon to Mars Program Office. While NASA continues to develop capabilities needed to support Artemis efforts, the agency does face several challenges. These include the Artemis schedule, a lack of transparency into the Artemis mission and program costs, and other acquisition management challenges. In terms of Artemis 3 schedule, in our November 2023 report, we found that there were a variety of factors that made the previous December 2025 date unlikely. These included an ambitious schedule, delays to key events, and the remaining technical work. Specifically, we found that if the HLS development took as many months to complete as an average NASA project, it was likely Artemis 3 would be likely to occur in early 2027. Just last week, NASA adjusted the launch date to September 2026 to allow contractors more time to complete a significant amount of remaining technical work. In terms of Artemis 3 mission costs, in December 2019, we found that NASA didn't plan to establish an official cost estimate for this mission. We made a recommendation, and NASA concurred with it, to establish one, but has not yet done so. While NASA requested $6.8 billion to support Artemis 3 programs in the fiscal year 2024 budget request, decision makers will have limited knowledge into the full scope of the Artemis 3 mission costs until an estimate is created. Last, in terms of acquisition management, NASA has been on GAO's high-risk list for a number of years related to acquisition management and has made a lot of progress there. But NASA's largest, most complex projects, including those that support the Artemis missions, continue to shape the agency's entire acquisition portfolio. When these projects exceed their cost or schedule baselines, it can have cascading effects on other projects and efforts. In our 23 assessment of NASA projects, we found that NASA anticipated setting baselines for 6 Artemis programs, including HLS. As these projects enter the portfolio, they will drive the agency's acquisition performance over the next several years, for good or ill. In summary, NASA has made important progress on its Artemis efforts, but challenges remain. NASA will need to manage multiple risks seamlessly. It will need to continue to find ways to elevate risks across programs and mitigate those. That includes increasing transparency on how much Artemis 3 and future Artemis missions are likely to cost. Implementing our past recommendations will help NASA to improve in these critical areas. Chairman Lucas, this completes my prepared remarks. Look forward to any questions the subcommittee may have.
Thank you. I now